Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special year-end look. The way it was, the way it will be. Hello, everybody. I'm Angelo DeCipio. Welcome to Wrestling with the Future. Joined tonight by my co-host, Dan the Man Sebastiano, the Happy Haberdasher, the smartest man in the room. Daniel, how are you tonight?
I'm good. You say year-end review. I don't know if there's much about 2020 I want to remember.
It's going to be one of them nights, brother. And joining us from deep in the heart of the Sunshine State, I don't know how much sunshine he's getting tonight, Big Ben Scala from Ocala. Benny, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing all right.
Well, it's been a really interesting couple of days. I didn't think this show was going to happen tonight, but we're all, the gang's all here. Let's just get right into it. We are, we're closing out 2020. Thank God. I don't know if 2021 holds much hope to be any better, but we certainly hope so. Certainly in the world of professional wrestling, it's been a shitstorm one after another. So Dan, let's take a kind of a lazy look through 2020. Let's start with what went right during the pandemic and work our way into what went wrong, and certainly a lot went wrong. But you are the smartest guy in the room, so tell everybody from your perspective what went right and what went wrong, and then we'll have Benny chime in here.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me in the mainstream of wrestling is the WWE put their title on Drew McIntyre. He's a longtime worker, hell of a performer, one of the legit tough guy wrestlers. Like, it looks like he's actually beating the shit out of you. I think giving him a long title run where they protected him. They have a bad habit of making their champions lose. He looked really good. I hate to compliment them because you know how much I bash them. But AEW spent a lot of this year with their commentary team being Tony Schiavone and Jim Ross, two of the best table talkers in my lifetime anyway. So I mean, hearing commentary that's not Michael Cole shilling the network every 5 minutes was refreshing. You had obviously some highlight matches, a couple of personal moments, marriages and children and whatnot. But really, if I had to pick a couple, that'd be my big two was commentary and McIntyre finally getting his due with the title run.
Benny, how about from your perspective? You're a guy who has a few years on Dan the Man, and what does the voice of experience say about the 2020 in pro wrestling?
Well, I got very saw NWA line on YouTube, their weekly show, and I thought finally something I can watch on a weekly basis, and I really enjoyed it. Jim Cornette notwithstanding.
Yeah.
I guess he said a couple of things that got himself in hot water.
Oh boy!
But what else is new, right?
Right.
But
pretty much, yeah.
The layout of the show, that how the matches were put over, the interviews and everything like that, and even Nick Aldis, I thought the way he kind of comported himself and everything, very old school, and I really started getting into it. And then they yanked it out.
You mentioned Nick Aldis. I tell you what, you got to kind of feel bad for Nick Aldis.
Absolutely.
He looks like a champion. He carries himself like a champion. He's a hell of a worker. It's a shame, though. It's a real travesty that he's never really had the opportunity here. And I say here, meaning in America, he's never really had the opportunity to show wrestling fans here what he's capable of. Squash match after squash match or mismatch after mismatch is more the case. But Nick is a hell of a worker, and I don't think that he's got his just desserts or his rewards. I don't know, Benny. Maybe let's talk. Maybe Dan, you can throw your youthful insight onto this. Benny, did he make political enemies, or is he so old school, Dan, that people don't understand him or don't know how to take him? So we'll start with Benny first.
I mean, as far as Nick Aldis,
Yeah.
I think the guy, he's got it all as far as I'm concerned. He can wrestle. He just carries himself like a champion. The way he dresses, the way he acts.
Yeah.
He's very, not really Ric Flair. I mean, he's not as flamboyant as Ric Flair was, and not as as far as the interviews. But he's he's probably, if Harley Race had a British accent, I think Harley Race would be Nick Aldis. Just the way he carries himself, and
Well, yeah, and that's a really good point. But here was my original question: was did he make enemies along the way, and why has he not gotten further than he has so far? I mean, he's really, he achieved the heavyweight championship of basically what was once a great company that's now just a company in name. Dan, you want to throw your insight onto that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think
where
it's
I'm
unfair.
going with it, right?
I do. Yeah, I think it's. I don't want to say unfair, but it's not entirely fair to say he hasn't had the best success. I mean, the problem was most American fans know Nick Aldis from his time in TNA. But unfortunately you had the British Invasion, you had his various tag teams. By the time he was anywhere near the top of the card, they were already scraping the bottom of the barrel with the Aces and Eights storyline, with the Dixieland stable or whatever, when Dixie Carter kept insisting on being the evil manager. And so they kind of felt wasted on his end, and then he jumps to TNA and his feud with Tim Storm, which I thought was phenomenal, especially because they did all the, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to remember what they were called, the title, basically all these backstage mini documentaries on YouTube.
The 10 pounds of gold.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Leading up to their title match, and he kind of ran with it since, and I think TNA, or excuse me, the NWA sort of had somebody they could hang their hat on, but
yeah,
COVID got in the way, and
yeah, well, well, that's the question. Dan, you prompted a great discussion. Did COVID get in the way, or did the NWA get in their own way?
Well,
because I have, and I want to talk to you and Benny about this, because you laugh at that because
right.
Listen here.
Well, I think from the NWA side, I think you can blame COVID. They, unlike AEW and the WWE, the NWA didn't own the arena they were filming in. I think if they did, and they kept making empty arena YouTube shows, I think they would have stayed more relevant. The problem is that they, how to word this, they went old school. I mean, those NWA broadcasts remind me of the territory shows from the 80s. 50 people crowd. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
But the problem is the average fan wasn't ready to just lock, stock, and barrel into the old school. I think they should have started more modern and slowly transitioned.
That's the problem. Dan, you just nailed it. That's the problem. The old school fans like Benny and I really appreciated how much time and money and energy they took in the aesthetic look of that studio. If they spent as much money on the talent as they did in that studio, they may still be around. And if you're Billy Corrigan and you're a multi-gazillionaire rock star,
right?
Is it going to kill you to buy a little building somewhere?
That's a fair point.
Okay. Here's the problem. I think that NWA is as much responsible for their demise as COVID is, because they could easily have purchased a small, 80 by 100 building somewhere,
right,
to house their shows. The problem is they were spending all this money on the look. Well, looks can only get you so far, and that's the problem. They spent all this money on the aesthetics and all this money on talent. They paid way too much money, by the way, for some of
Right.
their talent. A lot of money and again, remnants of WCW, ATM Eric, spending all this money to have people just so they won't go to the other guy.
Yeah.
When are we going to learn the lesson? Benny, when are we going to learn the lesson? Benny, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I was saying, when are we going to learn the lessons of WCW? Why did it take NWA folding up to learn the lessons of WCW?
Well, you mentioned Billy Corgan being a multi-gazillionaire, and remember back in the day, like when Billy Graham was a champion, he fought Harley Race. I think it was Miami, like a 2 out of 3 fall match.
Yeah.
The WWF champion against the NWA champion, and then you had Bob Backlund, I think, fought Ric Flair in Atlanta.
Yeah,
and maybe if Corgan could have approached Vince McMahon and said, why don't we promote Nick Aldis versus Drew McIntyre? And I think that would elevate.
You know what? And Dan, I hope you're going to go where I was going. Because we saw a promotion, Benny, actually do that. That promotion became AEW. We saw it with Nick Aldis and Cody Rhodes. In Chicago.
The very first All Out and Double or Nothing pay-per-views featured AEW talent against NWA talent. I think it was Nick Aldis won the NWA title from Cody Rhodes at one of those 2 pay-per-views.
That's exactly that's exactly my point. So yeah, it had been done, and they took. I thought, Dan, that they took a concept and ran with it and made the best of it. And why they did not continue is beyond my scope of understanding.
It's funny you mention that, because that's something that's happening right now in AEW with Kenny Omega having just won their title. The first promo he cut 10 minutes after the match, when they were doing the post-match interview, he said he was going to be on TNA the next week to bring their title over. So you're starting to see AEW and TNA bleed into each other.
I mean, this is what we're talking about. The mindset is just it's beyond comprehension that we're living in a time when so much possibility exists, but so little creative input into the mix. And why? Benny, the voice of experience. Again, I go to you, my friend, deep in the heart of Ocala, Florida. The voice of experience. Pull us out of this muck and mire.
Well, I really do think, though, that WWE is the key, though, because I think if Nick had a match with a Drew McIntyre or a Brock Lesnar, or a Randy Orton, don't you think it would lend a lot more credibility to the NWA?
Well, and there's a question for you, Dan, that maybe you can shed some light on this, because I don't know what the backstory is. Nick Aldis's wife, Mickie James,
yes, was
with WWE for quite an extended period of time. Keep in mind now, she's not an old lady, but she's certainly not a young woman in terms of the 20-year-olds that they have there now. We'll call her a seasoned veteran.
Yeah, I believe she's 40, either 40 or 41.
Okay. In terms of women's wrestling, but in terms of women's wrestling, she's a veteran. She's older,
right?
She's wrestling with and against people that are 19, 20 years old. You have to really stop and think about the age differential here.
Yeah,
she's old enough to be the mother of some of these girls.
I would say most of the women she wrestles watched her when they were kids on TV.
Yeah, Benny, that's my point. Yep. And here's the other point I'm making. They had Mickie there. Would it have killed them just to bring Nick over? Would it have killed him to have and I don't look, my mind always works. I would have called it Mickey and Nikki,
Yeah. Well, I mean, they did a big storyline in TNA when she was doing her country music side projects, where Nick Aldis kind of became, well, I guess he was Magnus back then. He kind of became Mickey James's husband more than he was his own character. But I'd have to look this up. But I remember correctly, something about him personally. There was the story when he became a free agent, when he left TNA, the story was the WWE wasn't interested in him at all. I don't know whether it was his look or his attitude or what, but I do know the story came out that they didn't even give him a second look.
And that's a shame, because I would have taken Nick Aldis, and I'll tell you straight up what I would have done. I would have made him, and Benny, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I would have molded him in the image of Lord Alfred Hayes. He would have been perfect as that Lord Alfred Hayes character.
Right.
Because Alfred Hayes, people think, oh, he was just an announcer. People don't realize Lord Alfred Hayes wrestled for 40 years.
Yeah.
They don't, because they're kids and they don't know.
Even a reincarnation of Steven Regal.
Exactly. Look, I mean, you can't say that there was nothing there that that Aldis brought to the table. Look at William Regal or Steven Regal, whatever you want to call him. The point is, that's exactly cut from the same mold.
Right.
That's his character. The uppity British snob.
Right.
Right.
He was exquisite in that role. He dressed the part, Dan the Man.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened to that? They, again, creative took a giant crap.
Yeah, well, it's actually
on a tried and true gimmick. You want to call it what it is. It's a gimmick.
No, you're right, and it's actually funny that you mention Alfred Hayes, because he had that Regal announcer feel. Like when he was doing the backstage interviews, when he was doing the interviews ringside, it had that main event, Howard Cosell talking to Muhammad Ali kind of big feel, because he had the voice, he had the look. That's actually something Nick Aldis has criticized before, not just the WWE, but wrestling in general, that it doesn't have that invested feel anymore. Most wrestling promotions don't put out a product that the average person can care about or be interested in.
And that's exactly, I'm going to tie right in exactly what you said. Lord Alfred Hayes, for all intents and purposes, started his career in Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's blue collar nuts and bolts territory.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What put him over was that he was that uppity British elite snob,
right,
amongst these, blue collar, beer belly, Friday night football, beer drinking guys.
They brought a lunch pail to work every day.
Exactly.
Right.
And they wanted to hate him, and they loved to hate him. But they made him a star.
Oh, and he had that voice. I mean, he was no Art Donovan when it came to calling a wrestling match, but he had that voice. How much does that guy weigh? He had that voice that just something, like I said, that Howard Cosell, that modern, like an Al Michaels in the modern era, where just hearing him talk about sports made it sound more important.
In his voice, you could hear how far up his nose was turned. Exactly.
Yeah, but
am I lying, Benny?
No, but he gave an air of legitimacy to wrestling when he called it.
Exactly. That's exactly what Dan was saying. Exactly. I think that's exactly what Dan.
No, you're absolutely right.
That was a great piece of wrestling that we won't ever see again. And Billy Corrigan took a financial beating. Not that he probably didn't feel the pinch of it at all. He's got so much freaking money.
Right.
But, my contention is, even to some degree, guys, and have you comment on this, Dan. Somebody like Tony Khan that's worth literally billions of dollars, who arguably has more money than McMahon's. And I think that's factual.
No, you're absolutely right.
I don't think there's any argument that Tony Khan has substantially more money than the McMahons.
Yeah.
Why is he pissing it away? What is he doing?
Well, the fact is, and I know it's not to criticize a product that apparently some people like.
Why not? Because I hate
Tony Khan is by all, and I hate to use this word, Tony Khan is by all definitions, he is a mark. He is a mark, and when a mark has money to throw at a product, Tony Khan is playing video game creative promotion with real life people. He can, how else do you justify Sting and some of the Four Horsemen references and paying all that money to have Jake Roberts cut a promo 3 times a month? You have this, he's a mark, and he's a mark with a bottomless pocket. So yes, he can spend money on whatever the hell he wants.
And you know what? And he knows he's a mark, and his employees know he's a mark. And they're not going to correct him, and they're not going to tell him that he can't do it and spend his money. And he's got that kind of money. He can spend it as he wishes. But the more he spends, the more of a mark he looks like. Benny, what is your thought on this whole AEW fiasco? And I call it a fiasco because it really is. And I said to Dan before, and I think you might have been on the show, Benny, that I had great hope. I held out great hope for AEW. I really, really did. I was hoping that finally here's a company that's got some financial backing. They've got some great talent under their, in their roster, and talent behind the scenes that can really make a difference. And my hopes, they fell flat in front of me, scattered all over like burnt firewood.
Shut the shit.
Picking up the cold embers. What happened, Ben?
I feel exactly the same way, and I would venture to say that there's, when I first heard about him, I got excited too, and I'm thinking, Jim Ross, well, one of my favorite announcers of all time, and
exactly.
Cody Rhodes. Well, I love Cody Rhodes, and it never became what I thought it was gonna be. I would venture to say that there's very few guys my age watching it. I don't know what the demographic is. I'm thinking you're talking about 16-year-old kids that are watching that show.
The demographic that they target, and you can tell because they always hype whenever they announce their ratings, they always emphasize it, is 18 to 40, that 18 to 49-year-old or 18 to 39-year-old male, that demographic. Because when they say, we got X, like a 3 share.
Let's talk about that. Dan the man, let's talk about that demographic. 18 to 49, the 18 to 40-year-old males, okay? It's an interesting demographic because, especially now in this particular period of time that we're going through, the 18 to 40-year-old is, by and large, uneducated, underemployed or unemployed, does not have a professional background. Isn't this exactly who the wrestling fan is?
Yeah, it's funny because the 18, you think about we've talked about this so many times on the show. You watch the territory tapes, and that's not a crowd full of 18 to 40-year-old men. It's old women, it's elderly people, and people bringing their grandkids. It's people in their 50s. It's little children. The demographic, at some point, wrestling got away from their fan base and started catering to people who usually weren't wrestling fans, and AEW, and I'm going to bounce off what Benny said. What's killing out, like, that demographic is fine. What's killing outside that demographic is you see your Cody and your Chris Jericho, and you bring these people in and you think they're going to change the game. But instead, Cody and Jericho and the talent, they start wrestling the Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks matches, and now everybody on their roster sucks.
You used the word there, Dan, and Benny, I'm sure you picked up on it. You used the word there that did not get lost on me. It's the magic word, catered to.
Yep.
They catered to. And let's be honest about it. Cody said they were going to cater to a niche audience. In so doing, he sealed their fate.
Yeah.
Now, it used to be a time, Benny, when they catered to the casual audience, guys like you and I, guys that had a level of professionalism, guys that would take our kids, our grandkids, would go with the guys from work to the Spectrum or the Nassau Coliseum or the Garden, right? Now, you'd be first of all, you'd be hard pressed to see anyone taking any member of their family. They're usually going by themselves because no one else wants to be seen with them, embarrassed to be walking into a wrestling show anywhere, USA. Right. But in our time and in our day, you took the kids and grandmom and grandpa and look, families down south, you know, in Charlotte, North Carolina, Christmas Day, they would sell out the Coliseum.
Yeah.
They would all go. The whole family would go to the wrestling match. You're not going to find that, and they'll never happen again. That will never happen again. Benny, chime in.
Look at the first big pay-per-views when I was a kid. Starrcade aired on Thanksgiving. That was the whole family would eat dinner and then watch Starrcade. You know, it was wrestling was part of the gathering of the get together, especially in the South.
Well, yeah, not only that, Dan, but think about how many people filled up that building.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. Thanksgiving night, you had 30,000 people at the Coliseum.
Exactly. That's a lot of people that left the dinner table early to go to a wrestling show.
Yep.
Benny, chime in.
I think, and this is just my opinion, and I'm not a marketing guy, but, you know, like you said, I'm a broken down accountant from Ocala. But I'm not broken down, and I'm not from Ocala, but I am an accountant. But I think what's happened is it's just lost its mass appeal. I think, like you said, you know, back in the day, you know, you all went to the matches together, and it wasn't, you know, like the dad didn't take the kids out of a sense of obligation. The dad took the kids because he liked it just as much as they did. Even the grandparents.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's what's missing now.
And that's the point I was making to Dan. You know, I had to smarten up this young squire here, you know, because he is a mere child. It's just just turned 37. He's just a pup. Dan, have that conversation with Benny about would you take, you know, your wife or your you know, your nieces and nephews to a wrestling match today? And be in all candor, be honest.
Well, I'll admit, my wife and I have actually been to several wrestling events. We live in Norfolk. That's still a huge market for both the WWE during their, well, not anymore during the house show tours, but when TNA was still trying to be the Southern promotion, like the NWA Part 2, they came through Norfolk all the time. Right. My wife and I have been to several shows. And there's a big Hampton Roads, the Norfolk, Virginia Beach, as far as Richmond, the Carolinas. There's still a big indie market out here, so we go to a lot of the indie shows too. But as far as kids, honestly, I would be hard pressed to, hey, you know, Dan Jr., come watch wrestling with me, because odds are my kids aren't going to like it. I'm invested because I've been a wrestling fan for, you know, almost 40 years. Somebody who turns on Monday Night Raw for the first time today is going to lose interest 10 minutes into the show.
And Benny, I think that's what you and I can relate to. You and I can relate to being old enough to go into the Garden or the Spectrum or the Coliseum, you know, and know what it's like to sit down with our niece, our nephew, our kids, and have that bonding experience. Today, it's not a bonding experience. It's like, okay, well, we're going to go out tonight. But back then,
Dan lives in what used to be a hotbed. Norfolk. This was
the Scope. Sure.
I mean, that was a huge mainstay for NWA back in the day.
Yeah, NWA, and then eventually Crockett and WCW. A lot of their big moments. Flair Rhodes, Flair Steamboat 2. Those were all here at the Scope.
Yeah,
and they were there every month, weren't they?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
We should also point out that the Norfolk Scope, maybe infamous or famous or infamous, depending on how you want to look at it, Dan. You know where I'm going with it.
Right.
It was the site of the shot heard cross the bow.
Yeah.
Literally, in fact. The WWE rolled up upon the Norfolk Scope, literally in a tank.
Yep.
That was Arrow. Jeez.
Full regalia and military uniform, and camouflage makeup, and the Jeep with an artillery gun.
Yeah, because both WWF and WCW were holding their Monday night shows in Norfolk that day, and one thing led to another.
And that kind of drama is missing. We'll never see it again.
Yep.
And that saddens me that, first of all, it saddens me here in New Jersey that there has literally not been a single wrestling show in literally 1 year.
Well, you look at it's. I'm glad you mentioned that, Angelo, because we've talked about this before. The territory days, when you had all the territories, yes, there was a gentleman's agreement not to overlap, but you still had to be a good territory because people could drive up the road or drive to another city or turn a different channel and watch something else. If you look at when the final territories folded, the AWA and when the NWA kind of became centralized. When the WWF officially had no longer had any real competition, that was the beginning of the new generation with your stupid gimmicks and your crazy matches. Really, the downfall of modern wrestling was no competition. And then the Monday Night Wars, some of what was arguably the best wrestling of its generation, picked back up because there was competition.
Yeah.
I think a part of me wanted the AEW and the NWA to succeed because when you have 2-3 big promotions to watch, you have to be better or somebody's going to change the channel. When you're the only game in town for 20 years, your product eventually is going to grow stale.
Well, here's what happened, and this is interesting that you say that. The ECW Arena was a small building in Philadelphia that held a sizable amount of people, largely because the fire department turned their head and looked the other way.
Right.
But I mentioned this because it was in an area called Swanson and Rittner. Now, it's not far from a main drag called Delaware Avenue, which, by the way, is filled block after block with empty warehouse upon empty warehouse. From the 80s, and I'm not even kidding, from the 80s to the mid to latter 90s, almost 18 to 20 years, every one of those warehouses were filled with indie wrestling promotions. And every one of those warehouses had at least 500 to 700, 500 to 1,000 people on any given Friday or Saturday night. In a 5-block area, it was nothing. It was nothing to have 7 or 8 indie shows going on the same street. That went on for almost 20 years. Because the ECW Arena was so close by, they could afford the overflow. And very often, and a lot of people don't know this, I know because I was there, the guys from ECW would often go into these places and do a exhibition match, or just do like a run-in, or just make an appearance.
Right. Kind of like
they would all do it. There were plenty of places to go. You don't see that anymore.
No, not not in the slightest. You don't really see much involvement, and we talked about it when we had Karen McDaniel on, where when you get some of the older talent, like I was telling the story where I saw Wahoo at an indie show. I mean, half the crowd was there to see him sign autographs and stand in the ring for 5 minutes. Nobody gave a shit about the indie wrestling, and that's not a knock on the indie talent. It's just the market today it hasn't produced any new big names in a generation that the older names. I mean, like Benny mentioned with AEW, here's the two biggest names on your screen right now are Chris Jericho and Sting. Like you have half your roster's under the age of 25, and somebody who watches every week probably can't name 5 people.
And the two biggest stars in your company are 50 and 61 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Okay. Think about that.
Yep.
And but again, wrestling history, Benny, is repeating itself. Where have we seen this before? Oh, let's see. Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Triple H. I can go on. All of these guys are between 50 and 60 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did this for WrestleMania. They did this for SummerSlam. They did this for Survivor Series, the Royal Rumble.
And it's not even just the WWF. I mean, look at what happened to the AWA's ratings and attendance figures when, in 1985 and your main event still had Vern Gagne in it.
And he was
exactly.
Even as loyal as the fans were to him, they got tired of seeing an old man be the centerpiece of your entire show.
That's why.
And even after
when Larry Zbyszko was here. Oh, I'm sorry, Benny. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I said even after Vern Gagne, they put the belt on another old guy, Nick Bockwinkel,
right?
Who was had the chance of a lifetime with Hulk.
And Benny, I'm glad you said that, because I was just about to chime in with when we had Larry Zbyszko here. He told Dan and I exactly what you just said. Everybody knew Nick Bockwinkel was a great wrestler, no question about it. But he was at 15 years past his prime.
Right.
Nick wrestled. People don't understand this. Nick was in his 60s, still wrestling.
Yeah.
Nick Bockwinkel and Tito Santana wrestled an old-timers match at the Meadowlands in New Jersey back in the day. Okay? Tito was pushing 60. Nick was 65.
Right.
Wow.
People don't understand that, but they were, and for guys that age, they were two of the best looking guys on the card.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. Benny mentioned Hulk Hogan, them dropping the ball on Hulk Hogan when Bockwinkel was defending the title against Hulk Hogan. He was already in his 50s.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, again, goes back to, where are the stars of tomorrow? Hence the name of our show, Wrestling with the Future.
Yeah.
And wrestling really is wrestling with the future. They are literally grappling with the future of wrestling, because I am one of those guys. I'm on record, and everybody here knows it. I'm on record as having said, you will see the death of pro wrestling in the next 2 years, in under 2 years. And I caveat myself, if you don't see a dramatic shift to stop the presses, realign ourselves with who we are, remember where we came from, and remember how we got there. If that doesn't happen, wrestling's dead.
Yep.
It's dead. And it's a sad state of affairs, Dan. And you can comment on this, having been to some indie shows, far more than I have, quite frankly, because there's nothing here.
Right.
When you have the indie promotions doing old school better than the big companies, and And I want you and Dan. I mean, I want you, Dan, and Benny to have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually funny. We were talking about, and I talked about announcing. We mentioned AEW. One of the big stories of the last, I'd say, 72 hours or so in wrestling was Jim Ross did an interview, and he lambasted, I mean, just completely buried the AEW match, you know, the flips. Yeah. And he talked about how everybody huddles in the corner. He said, what did he say? They huddle like a group of quail, you know, in the corner waiting for somebody to do the dive. And then it looks so fake and stupid. And every match has 100 super kicks and the DDT's not protected. And he went into this whole rant, and he basically buried the roster of the company he works for. And he's absolutely right. A lot of people that came out of the woodwork were like, yeah, you know, he's right.
And nobody's going to argue with him because he's right, and they're paying him
exactly
a small mint to be there.
It makes you wonder. There's no way that's the first time he's ever said this. He's probably been working with these guys for. I mean, AEW's been around for almost 2 years. You know, he's probably been telling them every day, "Stop this, listen to me," and they're ignoring him, or they're just not absorbing
it. They're doing to him, and I want Benny to chime in because. This is one you and Benny have this man in common. He's one of your favorite people. They're doing to Jim Ross. These young kids are doing to Jim Ross what they did to Vince Russo. Say what you want about Vince Russo as a writer, but the guy has been around long enough to know what works and what doesn't. He didn't make $1 million, you know, by just getting lucky. He did something right. Have that conversation.
Hey, what do you think, Benny?
I absolutely love Jim Ross. I mean, besides Gordon Soley, probably my all-time favorite announcer. Mm-hmm. But I gotta believe that when he goes home at night, he's got to be shaking his head. I just, you know, I'm sure he's loving his paycheck. But I can't believe that he believes that this stuff is good.
Well, you know, it's funny, as I can't speak for what you and Angelo do. I try and keep up with AEW and the WWE for the sake of the show. And I love Jim Ross as an announcer, like you said. Gordon Soley, I put him up there. I mean, he's easily Mount Rushmore of announcing. But you hear him talk, even when he's trying to sell, even when he's pushing the match and he's trying to put people over. You can hear in his voice, it's like an actor reading a bad script. Like, he clearly doesn't believe everything he's saying, or he's trying to trip. He trips over his own words trying to describe something. Half the match, he'll sit there. I mean, somebody will hit, a guy will hit somebody with a chair, and Jim Ross will chime in and be like, well, we'll have to figure out why that's not a disqualification. Like, he tries to put a realistic spin on just the crap that he's seeing. And the man sounds broken. I mean, I'm sure, like you said, I'm sure he's loving those paychecks, and obviously he has a lot of connections with Anderson and Tully Blanchard and Saul in the company. But I think it hurts Vince. I almost called him Vince Russo. I think it hurts Jim Ross the same way when you listen to Vince Russo at the end of his time in WCW, where even though he's big in the company, it's blatantly obvious he sees the crap that's coming out of it.
Dan, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
What happens? At what point do you say? At what point? Maybe you and Benny could both chime in on this. At what point do you say it's time to listen to my moral compass? And even though they're paying me all this handsome money, I just can no longer, in good conscience, be here.
I know we brought up his name earlier, Jim Cornette. When AEW started, there was a very high-profile, very, very lucrative offer. They sent Jim Cornette, and even until recently, there's been pushes to bring him into the company as both an announcer and a mouthpiece. And he said time and time again, he wants nothing to do with that product. Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, as long as that flippy bullshit is on the roster, I want nothing to do with the company, no matter how much you pay me. I don't know how long Jim Ross's contract is, but I think he'd be hard pressed to extend it much longer.
That's exactly what I was getting to. At what point do you say, you know what, guys? Thank you for the ride. It was a great ride. I made I made some nice money here, but I just can't do this anymore. Like
Well,
what to use the old BB King, the thrill is gone.
Right. Well, I mean, he definitely has. He's the consummate professional. I mean, he stayed through his WWE contract despite Vince McMahon shitting on him for fun. So I think he'll at least finish out whatever contract he has with AEW, and he'll give him 100% to the end. But I don't see him staying around after that at this point, anyway.
What about that, Benny?
I completely agree. I mean, I think deep down, the man knows he has a legacy he needs to preserve. I mean, the guy called, Magnum TA against Mr. Wrestling 2. And
did we lose Benny?
I'm seeing a still feed on him.
Yeah. Did we lose you? Oh, we lost Benny. Oh.
Okay. Looks like he's trying to get back in the call here.
Oh, okay. But maybe you can pick up, Dan, where Benny was, because you're pretty good about chiming in where he left off at.
That's weird,
Wow.
Benny's.
I'm losing everybody here tonight.
Benny's disconnected me.
Yeah, wow. I was just going to say, why don't we pick up where Benny left off at?
Yeah, no, he's actually 100% right. I mean, you're talking Magnum TA, Mr. Wrestling 2, Jim Ross. I think till the day he dies, he'll be mostly associated with stop the damn match. Good God, he's dead. Mankind getting thrown off to Hell in a Cell.
Yeah.
Some of the high profile calls he had when he was with Crockett and the Southern Wrestling. I mean, I think he doesn't want to go the way.
And let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
And I just, as you're speaking, something, again, my wheels are going, something prompted this question. We saw this happen with Ric Flair. We almost saw it happen with The Undertaker. Thank God he got smart and took a job backstage, and he's not going to have to worry about working anymore. But here's the question I have. We know a wrestler can overstay their welcome.
Yes.
We've seen it time and time again on a myriad of levels, old school to now. Can an announcer overstay their welcome?
Yes.
Is there a time, Dan, when they're just not relevant anymore?
I mean, maybe relevant. Yes, I think it's the same thing with. You see it in some of the modern product. Despite the fact that he was so beloved, when Howard Finkel stepped away from the WWF or WWE, because his voice, he had that 80s sports, he had the 80s wrestling voice. He wasn't the sports entertaining sounding commentator.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's a time you see it with some managers who stick around. The next thing you know, they've got some random ass wrestler as their client, and it's like, at this point, just retire.
One that comes to mind, and I'm sure Benny will remember, but one that comes to mind is Luscious Johnny's Valiant when he did that stint as a manager. I thought that was such a colossal waste of time and talent and money and energy, because what did he really accomplish other than to get a payday for a night? What did he really get? A couple of bucks?
Yeah.
Oh, and Benny, we lost Benny again. Oh, there's Benny.
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh. So what do you think, Benny? I mean, that's what comes to mind.
I do think
Johnny V.
Yeah, I love Johnny V. I mean, I think at some point, like even Gordon Soley, late in his career, much as I love the guy, I think I looked at him more as a nostalgia act than a contemporary announcer. And I think that's what Jim Ross has to be wary of. Same thing is,
Well, and I agree with, believe it or not, I agree with you, but I think what Gordon had going for him is the fact that he had this incredible sense of realism, that this is a real, legit sport. He lended, and I think that's the word I'm looking for. He lended an air of real legitimacy that when Gordon Soley spoke, it was like Gordon Soley was like the Walter Cronkite of the wrestling world. When he spoke, you listened.
When they panned to his desk, I mean, it was almost like you were visiting a newsroom. It was so legitimate.
Yeah, then that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Like late towards the end of his career, I meant, but in his prime, there was nobody better than him.
And we should point out, this is a great place to segue into. Next week, December the 22nd, we will have Pam Allen with us. And if you don't know the name Pam Allen, you certainly do her. You certainly do know her as the daughter of Gordon Soley. She is Gordon Soley's daughter. She will be with us December the 22nd. That is our last show until January the 5th. We are on Christmas hiatus, and then we are reformulating, repackaging Wrestling with the Future to make it bigger and better and more inclusive to the people that we like, and we're going to completely shit on the people we don't like. And I'll just tell you straight up, that's what we're going to do.
Right.
And you know why?
Because that's what I do.
Because that's what we're going to do. And I'm tired of kissing people's asses. I'm not going to do it anymore. And we're going to tell it like it is because we go there. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to have Gordon Soley's daughter, Pam Allen. You know what, Benny and Dan? That might be a great opportunity to ask her next week. Well, exactly what we're talking about. How did your father view his place in wrestling? That would be an interesting conversation to have. What do you think about that, Ben?
Absolutely. I mean, you wonder how people view themselves. Like, you wonder how Vin Scully, did he think to himself, man, I'm the best ever? Or am I just doing my job? Maybe the same thing with Gordon Soley. I just, whenever I watched Championship Wrestling from Florida, and I saw him at his announce desk, and he had like Harley Race or Terry Funk, and it just was so believable.
Exactly. And that's exactly the point. I mean, he had that, legit sports field, a sense of like legit, like this guy's the real deal.
He even had papers on his desk. I always wonder what was on those papers.
And thank you for noticing. It's like, he had all of his notes, neatly lined up. People, because even when you're a kid, you don't realize that he's looking at a teleprompter reading off of cue cards. Right. But who cares when you're a little kid, you buy into the myth. Benny, let's at this point in the show, let us have a word from our sponsor, and we will we'll say goodnight. I hope we got the Dan back in here. Dan fell off the grid, so I don't know what happened to Dan.
All right, so is it time?
It is time to hear a word from our friends at Manscaped.
All righty. Okay, well, do you have sweaty balls or volleyball netty balls? Maybe even Yeti balls, or back in the day, Roosevelt Teddy balls. Time to make some ready balls. And Manscaped's Lawnmower 3.0 will do the job on your knob with its patented no-neck head, so your head will be better than Right Said Fred. Enter wrestling for a generous 20% discount. That's Future for a 20% discount. Manscaped.com and Wrestling with the Future are going balls to the wall. .com and the Lawnmower 3.0. Your balls will thank you, and so will we.
Oh shit! I love that.
Glad you liked it.
That was beautiful. Oh my god, that was beautiful. Perfect, perfect. I love only Benny Scala could reference Teddy Roosevelt in
That
a
that was a
male
stretch. That's
grooming
what I saw.
commercial. How do you pull that one off?
I don't know.
I really hope Dan the Man heard that one. That was classic.
I
You
had
guys
to
hear
do
me?
our sponsor proud.
Oh yeah, Dan the Man is back.
Hey,
Brother.
we lost power. Sorry about that.
Wow.
Did you?
Yeah, it just blinked on and off. I had to reboot the computer.
Oh, I guess. Are you guys getting a heads up on the snow down there, Dan? Is that what's happening?
Probably just the wind.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're supposed to get some nasty weather. In your absence, bless his heart, our friend Benny Scala from Ocala was telling everybody about President Teddy Roosevelt. I'll just
That's
tease
why they
that.
call him the Rough Rider, right, Angelo?
Yeah,
Isn't his nickname the Rough Rider?
he was the Rough Rider, and he
That's why.
certainly
He didn't have
benefits from Manscaped.com.
Oh
Absolutely.
no.
Absolutely.
Then he went
Dan,
down
that's
to
all I'm
Smooth.
going to say to you, brother.
Oh,
That's all I'm going to say.
hilarious.
So, in concluding part one, what have we learned about the state of our beloved wrestling in 2020? And as we segue into Thursday night, let's give people a preview of what they can expect in maybe the year or two to come, in the world of pro wrestling. Benny, give me your predictions. Let's do it. Let's do a year-end prediction from Ben Scala. What do you see happening in the next, let's say, 2 years?
I predict it can only get better because it sure can't get any worse. And I'd like to start watching again. I mean, I'd like to stop, every once in a while, not have to watch YouTube videos of, JYD and Ted DiBiase from Mid-South, and maybe watch something a little bit more current.
Yeah, you know what, Benny? I absolutely concur with you. I absolutely concur. In my case, I've not seen a live show, literally in a year. I've not seen a televised wrestling show in 2 years. I have not gone, literally have not gone to a WWE show in almost 12, God, it's been that long, almost 12 years.
Wow.
Just over 11 years. Okay? That's for real. That's the real deal. I'm not even bullshitting. The last show I saw was close to 12 years ago at the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia. And before that, I can't even tell you. I cannot even tell you how long it was. Probably another 5 or 6 before that.
But how many times did you see them at the Spectrum in the 80s?
Every month.
Count, right?
Every month.
Right.
And once in a while, they would run a double shot. They'd be there twice in a month if it was a special occasion. Or they would play the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and they would come to New Jersey and play the Trenton, the Sovereign Bank Arena in Trenton, New Jersey. And they weren't far from each other. Maybe 30 minutes or so. But but those days are gone. You'll be hard pressed to find the big Fed come here once every 2 or 3 years. They haven't been to Philadelphia in ages.
Yep.
Long time.
I think maybe that's something we should talk about on Thursday too. Is like, how is it as a fan? Back in the day, we could go. Like, you could go to the Spectrum. I could go to the Garden. I could go to the Coliseum every month.
Yeah.
I can't do that anymore.
Well, not only the Spectrum, but don't forget, Benny, and even Dan knows. Back in the day, WWF would run the Spectrum The NWA would run the
Right?
Civic
Yeah,
Center.
Exactly.
The Civic Center. And on several occasions, they went head to head. And I got news for you. On one of those occasions, the NWA at the Civic Center beat out the Spectrum.
Yeah.
From what I'm listening
Which
to an audio
15,000 people.
territories.
Yeah, yeah. You know, 15,000
UA
people.
in Philly, a lot of times for WWF or WWE.
Right. And, 12,000 people at the Spectrum and 15 grand at the Civic Center. So in one night in the same city, you had 25,000, 30,000 people watching wrestling live. That don't happen anymore.
No.
Well, but back then we cared. We don't care anymore.
Well,
I think maybe I want to get Nikita Brezhnikov here Thursday because he could tell you about how they used to do double shots in Baltimore.
Yep.
Well, like Baltimore and DC on the same day.
Well, yeah, because they had the Capitol Center,
Right.
Yep.
and then the Baltimore Civic Arena.
I think too.
Baltimore Civic Center.
Something that gets lost in that is the quality. It's not just the house shows, the house circuit. That was not just the big crowds. I mean, we talked earlier. The invasion in Norfolk between the two Norfolk arenas. You had 25,000 people on a Monday night, but when you were a new, younger, up-and-coming green wrestler, the house show is where you cut your teeth. You'd wrestle the same person 4 or 5 times a week for months on end. Nowadays, they record one show a week, maybe, and not everybody wrestles every Raw, every SmackDown, every AEW, every NXT. So you don't get these guys that get to wrestle like Magnum TA told us. His first year wrestling, he wrestled 500 matches in a year. You got guys 5 years in the business haven't wrestled 500 matches. So the quality of your product goes down. So the crowds at your house shows go down. So you run less, and the quality of your it's a horrible vicious cycle. Now the WWE announced earlier this year they're done with house shows, Raw, SmackDown, and pay-per-views only. And obviously AEW doesn't have the fan base to do touring house shows the way that WCW and the NWA did. I think
that ties exactly into why I think wrestling in the next 2 years will die. Wrestling lived, thrived, survived on live people going to live events, watching a live show, paying money to park, paying money to get into the building, buying a ticket, buying your popcorn, buying your candy, buying your merch, a lot of merch.
And it was a reasonable night out. I mean, you could go to like when I lived in Maryland. I mean, you go to the arena, a house show in the arena of Baltimore. Good seats were $15, and that was in the 90s.
Yeah,
Sure. You could take like we talked about. You could a couple could take their grandkids to watch a wrestling show. $100 for the whole family, including parking and concessions. You got pay-per-views now. One boxing match is a $99.99 pay-per-view.
Well, think about that's the cost of a pay-per-view. Think about what it costs you to go to a show now. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever been to a football game or baseball game recently.
Yep.
It's going to cost you $40 to park.
Absolutely.
If you go to see a football game, you're going to spend $250, $300 for a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Conservative. You're going to pay probably $10 to $12 for a beer. You're going to pay $7 or $8 for a hot dog. If you can find a bag of peanuts, you may pay $5 for a bag of peanuts.
Yeah.
If you can find a bag. A tall can of beer is going to run you $15 easily.
Yeah.
A bottle of water is going to cost you $5. You got to take out a loan to go to a game now.
Yeah,
I've said that you have to take out a second mortgage just to go to a sporting event nowadays.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So here's what's going to happen, and watch it. It's going to happen. Watch. You are going to have literally a multitude, a legion of empty venues collapsing in on themselves. And you watch it. Owners are going to let these places go. They're going to take the loss. They're going to let the Spectrum, it's the Spectrum, it's already gone, the Wells Fargo Center, they're going to let it crumble in on itself. They're going to let Madison Square Garden just stay empty. Let the hockey, the Rangers play on the ice in an empty arena. Let them do that. No people don't belong there no more. They don't want you there. Well, guess what? Eventually it's going to catch up with you. No people means no revenue. No revenue means no cash flow. No cash flow means you can't pay nobody. And it's cool. Players, management, you can't buy equipment, what do you call them? Jerseys, pads, all the shit you need for a team. You can't buy nothing.
I got curious while you were talking, Angelo. I looked it up. The per NFL index for a family of 4. This is 4 tickets, 2 beers, 4 sodas, 4 hot dogs, and parking. In 2019, it was $1,351 per game. You're spending almost $1,400, the better part of $1,400 for a couple hours out with your family.
To Benny and I's point, you have to take out a loan to go to a sporting event. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I remember I could go see a championship fight at the Spectrum or the Philadelphia Arena or Madison Square Garden for $7.
Mm-hmm.
I could go see Bruno and Ivan Koloff for $7.50.
Yeah,
$10 ringside.
I sat at the Yankee Stadium for 75 cents to see a doubleheader.
There you go.
First match I ever went to out of my own. Obviously I was younger, but out of my own allowance money, it was a cage match heavyweight title. And floor seats were $15.
The first match I ever paid for myself and took a bus to get there was in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It was the Cherry Hill Arena. It was, in fact, it's the match I went to. It's funny, is in Nikita Brezhnikov's book. He's got the poster from that show I was at.
That's funny.
I paid $2.50 to see 8 matches, which included Chief J. Strongbow, Killer Kowalski, Salvatore Bellomo, and Rene Goulet. Wow. And the ring announcer was Buddy Wagner.
Wow.
Okay? In an 8,000 seat building. Okay? And they made money. All right? Dan, say good night to everybody. I'm going to let you do the go home. You do the sign off, and let's see how you do this thing, because I'm grading you now.
All right. Well,
I'm not grading on a curve, so.
Of course. Well, I mean, obviously, Wrestling with the Future. Nice, Benny. We can. Wrestling with the Future. We can be found anywhere podcasts are listened to. We're on Twitter at Wrestling Future. That's no G. We're on YouTube, Wrestling with the Future Podcast. We're on Facebook, Wrestling with the Future Podcast. We currently only have the private page now, a fan club exclusive Wrestling with the Future Podcast Facebook page. We're also on Instagram, Wrestling with the Future. And we can be, like I said, we can be found anywhere wrestling podcasts and podcasts can be listened to, as well as radio, cable. We're international. We continue to expand, continue to grow the fan base. We are a force to be reckoned with, and 2021 will only get better.
On that note, for Ben Scala, Big Ben Scala from Ocala, for Dan the Man, the Happy Haberdasher, the smartest guy in the room, I'm Angelo DeCipio. We will see you on Tuesday with Pam Allen, Gordon Soley's daughter. Take care, everybody, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We'll see you around. Bye-bye.